The progressive movement started at the beginning of the 20th century. It sought to use the government to improve human welfare, and they fought monopolies, corruption, inefficiency, and social injustice. Progressive roots. Henry Damaris Lloyd was critical to the Standard Oil Company in 1894 with his book Wealth Against Commonwealth. Jacob A. Riis shocked middle-class Americans in 1890 with How the Other Half Lives, which described the slums of New York. Socialists and feminists were at the front of social justice. Raking muck with the muckrakers. Muckrakers were reform-minded journalists who wrote articles in magazines that exposed corruption and scandal. President Roosevelt coined this term. These reporters went after trusts and politicians. In 1902, New York reporter Lincoln Steffens wrote The Shame of the Cities, which unmasked the corrupt alliance between big business and municipal government. Ida M. Tarbell published the devastating depiction of the Standard Oil Company. David G. Phillips published a series, The Treason of the Senate, in Cosmopolitan that charged the 75 of the 90 senators that did not represent the people, but they rather represented railroads and trusts. Some of the most effective attacks of the muckrakers were directed at social evils. The suppression of America's blacks was shown in race standards following the color line 1908. John Spargo wrote The Abuses of Children and Labor in The Bitter Cry of the Children 1906. The progressive reformers convinced Congress to pass the 17th Amendment in 1913. It established the direct election of U.S. senators. Progressivism in the cities and states. States used public utility commissions to regulate railroads and trusts. Robert M. La Follette was a governor of Wisconsin who took control from the corrupt corporations and returned it to the people. Governor of California Hiram W. Johnson helped to break the grip of the Southern Pacific Railroad on California politics in 1910. Progressive women. Women formed clubs in which they discussed and proposed solutions for societal problems, club movement. Some of these included the Women's Trade Union League and the National Consumers League. Lochner v. New York, 1905, invalidated a New York law that limited the workday to 10 hours for bakers. This law was eventually upheld in 1917. In Mueller v. Oregon, 1908, the Supreme Court ruled that it was constitutional to enact laws that specifically protected women factory workers. The Women's Christian Temperance Union, WCTU, was a large anti-alcohol women's group. TR's Square Deal for Labor. President Roosevelt believed in the progressive reform. He enacted a Square Deal program that consisted of 3 parts: control of corporations, consumer protection, and conservation of natural resources. In 1902, coal miners in Pennsylvania went on strike and demanded 20% raise in pay, and a workday decreased from 10 hours to 9 hours. When mine spokesman George F. Baer refused to negotiate, President Roosevelt stepped in and threatened to operate the mines with federal troops. A deal was struck in which the miners received a 10% pay raise and a 9-hour workday. The increasing hostilities between capital and labor forced Congress to create the Department of Commerce in 1903. This department provided oversight of business engaged in interstate commerce.